Hello, my miraculous friend, and welcome to the Magnify Your Miracles podcast. This is Reverend Francis Faden, and I'm so grateful that we get to spend some time together helping you to magnify your miracles. And I have an amazing guest to share with you today. But before we do that, let's take a few deep breaths and get ourselves grounded and centered. Just breathing in the energy of expansion and breathing out anything you no longer need. And if you are driving, please keep your eyes on the road, but you can still bring your awareness to your breath. And knowing that whatever it is that you most need today, whatever is going to help you to really move forward in your own healing, to help you magnify your miracles, is going to be exactly what happens today. You're going to hear whatever you really, really need to hear. So knowing that, let's just take a moment and feel the gratitude of having already received what we need. And taking one more deep breath together in gratitude, we can begin. All right, well, welcome once again, my friend, to the Magnify Your Miracles podcast. So today's episode is number 4 in the series that we're doing. I've been doing a 4-part series on self-healing and self-love for highly sensitive souls like you and me. And you all know that I never invite anybody onto my podcast unless it's somebody that I know can help you magnify your miracles, whether that's an author or practitioner, whoever it might be. That's why I'm so excited to share today's guest with you, because she's one of my practitioners. She's on my team of people that are really helping me to heal my lifelong issue of digestion. And I call her she's like the Sherlock Holmes of nutrition. She really, really helps. And when I was thinking about who did I want to bring in for this self-healing, we had a healing meditation. We talked about how to learn your own love language for you. We talked about the great book last week with Louise Hay of Loving Yourself to Great Health. And if you really want to know how to take the information in that book and really apply it to you specifically, you are going to love Sara. She really follows my personal philosophy, which you guys know. I always say, you can do all these general things, but you really want to find out what's going on with you. And that's what I do in my work when I'm working with people with their energy. I want to find out, is this going to work for you? And your energy is what tells me, is that working? Is that not working? Well, similarly, Sara is somebody who can tell you specifically what your body needs. And it's specific to you. It's not just this generic, I think I'll eat this way, I think I'll follow this diet. So it's really, really powerful. Let me introduce you to her. Sara Keough. Yay, I'm so excited she's here. She's an eco-nutritionist. We're going to talk about that. She's an eco-nutritionist who began her career in ecological work in her home state of Colorado, and now she practices as a clinical nutritionist in Maryland. She supports patients with a wide variety of health conditions, including digestive issues, autoimmune disorders, heart disease, diabetes, and even metabolic disorders. Educating patients on the value of nutrient-dense foods by consuming food from local regenerative farmers. We'll talk about what that is too. She says it's a vitally important part of her practice as it's an essential component of your healing process. Sara utilizes advanced functional testing in her practice to address the root cause of her patients' issues and to regenerate their health from the ground up. So powerful. Sara's passionate about connecting our farming communities with the healthcare community, as she truly believes that the regenerative farmers are the healers of the planet and may play a pivotal role in restoring human and ecological health. So awesome. Please help me welcome the beautiful Sara. Hi, Sara.
Oh, hi, Francis. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so honored to have you here. I've been wanting to have you on my podcast since the first time I talked to you. I was like, oh my God, I have to tell the world about her. So I always ask all of my guests, since this is a Magnify Your Miracles podcast, what is your definition of a miracle?
That's a good question. Very interesting question to reflect on. To me, a miracle is just something actually think everyone's capable of manifesting by tapping into our divine nature and inner wisdom. And, I personally believe that God or source or, universal love and energy is within all of us, and we're capable of producing miracles, every single one of us.
Absolutely.
Right. If we truly believe it. And I think that's the belief part is the hard part for a lot of people,
Yeah.
right? The challenging part for us humans in this human world defined by our human senses and what's hard to sense beyond that. But yeah, I'm a big believer in law of attraction, and our thoughts create our reality, and our emotional energies, play a huge role in that. And
Yeah.
yeah, when we're truly, tapped in and tuned in, and we can manifest all kinds of amazing miracles. And
And
I've
you've
seen
seen
some
them, haven't
miracles.
you?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I've seen some interesting miracles. I used to kind of call them synchronicities. You just see these little things that happen that's just beyond coincidence. You
Yeah.
know that it's not a coincidence, and it has to be some kind of divine intervention coming from us, within us.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Well, one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on the call is because I 100% have seen in the work that I've been doing my work now for like 30 years, I have seen that highly sensitive people often have something going on physically with them, especially in their digestion, because that second chakra, that third chakra, which is where all the digestion happens, a lot of times we have a hard time processing emotional things or energetic things or whatever it might be. So I know for me,
Absolutely.
it's been so crucial for me to take the time and be willing to say, okay, this is a step in, loving myself and all that. But our listeners also have this deep love for the earth and the planet. And this, one of the things I think makes you so different. Can you explain what an eco-nutritionist is for people that don't know what that is?
Yeah, this is like a funny little term that I came up with for myself. It was sort of just a joke for me, just kind of goofing around. Like, oh, eco-nutritionist. I'm combining my past of ecological work with what I do now in clinical work as a nutritionist. And now I just embrace it as, yeah, this is like eco-nutrition is actually a thing. And it's something that I feel a lot of the healthcare worlds, hopefully can get on board with, as far as tying, our eating choices to how it impacts the earth and the planet. So for me personally, like you mentioned in my bio, I have a background in ecological work. So I'm originally from Colorado, and I worked up in the Rocky Mountains, for a couple years. I did some internships, just really observing nature. That was one of the biggest things I did, was just observe nature and monitor, different populations of various species of animals. And that's a huge part of ecological work, is sort of monitoring biodiversity. So because of that background, I just have this really profound appreciation for how ecological systems function. And, I all the while I was working my biology degree and doing this work in environmental studies and conservation biology, I was struggling with an eating disorder. And I dealt with this eating disorder from a very young age, and it went on for about 20 years, started around 12 or 13. And it started out with restricting food, and then it turned into binge eating and bulimia. And I was underweight, I was overweight, and just very ill. Like, my gut health was a mess. I was incredibly anxious, very depressed. But I just kind of managed it like a lot of us do. We kind of get used to our conditions as our normal, and just function through it, right? So
Yeah.
that was my existence for much of my life. My teens and my 20s, sadly, were just, wrapped around this eating disorder that I hid from a lot of people. So that was this underlying, theme of my life. And I always was very interested in health, though, and nutrition, and how can I overcome these issues. And eating disorders are very complex. And I feel like a lot of people struggle with some type of eating disorder or disordered, eating, when it comes to our relationship with food. So for me, I wanted to really get to the root of my eating disorder. And eating disorders are complex in that it can be physiological and emotional and spiritual, and oftentimes what I find, especially in working with clients, is that when we have a negative relationship with food, it's often because we actually have a negative relationship with ourselves, and we're hating on ourselves and how we look, and, it becomes an obsession, right? For men and women. So I was dealing with this eating disorder all along and had this passion for health and nutrition, and was studying that while I was also in this field of conservation work. So anyway, fast forward, I get towards the end of my biology degree, my undergrad program, and I'm thinking, I just felt like I had a different calling. I had this change of heart and just started looking into nutrition programs. And I wanted a master's degree in nutrition taught from a holistic, sort of integrative perspective. And I found an amazing school out here on the East Coast, of all places. Never thought I'd be living in the East Coast, but moved from Colorado to Maryland to go to the Tai Sophia Institute. That's what it used to be called. It's now the Maryland University of Integrative Health. But got my master's degree there, and started working clinically as a nutritionist. And, as far as my personal healing journey, there was a lot of work that went into overcoming my eating disorder, and without nutrition, and looking into what was happening with my physiology, with my gut health, my nutritional deficiencies, and really investigating all the root cause of that, that from a physiological standpoint, I would never overcome it. But obviously all the inner work and, therapy was incredibly important as part of that healing process. But I started working with clients, even during my graduate degree program, my master's program. And after I got out of school, I worked in a few doctors' offices, and just really learning a lot from my patients as far as, our food system. I started really looking into where our food comes from and how it's grown. Because what I was hearing from a lot of my foreign patients was that the food here in the United States didn't have flavor. I thought that was really interesting. So I worked in like the DC area for a couple of years, right? Huge melting pot, so many different cultures.
Right.
And that was so enlightening for me. And I kept hearing this message from them, like, why does the food here have no flavor? And me being an American, not knowing any different, like, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean it has no flavor? And so that led me to soil and looking at how our food was grown. And I came to really understand that if our soil is lacking in nutrient density, if our soil is not healthy, then our food is not healthy, and then we are not healthy. So we're very, very connected to the soil. And everything started coming full circle after that. I started learning about regenerative agriculture, which we can discuss, but essentially regenerative agriculture is regenerating soil health, different farming practices that are encouraging healthy soil, that again, create healthy food and healthy people. So it was just so interesting, that whole journey coming full circle, like, wow, now I'm getting, back to my roots in ecological health, which I never expected. So, yeah.
So it's all connected, which totally makes sense to me.
Yes, absolutely.
So one of the things that, that you've shared with me, and first of all, I just want to say that I highly recommend that you work with Sara, but one of the reasons that I worked with her, that I'm so grateful for, is because she's actually caught stuff that my own doctor didn't see, like, because she's so into these tests and so into the data, and like who really knows how to read them. But you helped me to see, like, that what's happening on the planet and what's happening with my gut, it's the same thing.
Yes.
And I kind of knew that, like, maybe as a vague concept, like, oh, that makes sense, we're all connected. But you were like, no, no, no. This is what's happening in your microbiome. This is what's happening in kind of the macrobiome. Like, this is what's really going on. And seeing that connection is really important. So I know that that's something that you're really passionate about, is not just like eat more protein, eat less carbs or something like that, that you're really passionate about that connection and how can we take care of ourselves at the same time taking care of the planet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, healing, whether it's gut healing, whether it's losing weight, or, calming down inflammation, resolving an autoimmune issue, it's all, the first place I start with every person is sort of cleaning up the diet and sourcing better quality food, the best quality food we could possibly find that's grown from healthy soils. But yeah, it is amazing how it's all connected. There's this quote I want to read actually from one of
Yes.
my heroes, Wendell Berry. He's just this amazing farmer in Kentucky, and he wrote a book called The Unsettling of America, which I highly recommend if people really want to learn kind of about the history of how agriculture really changed in this country, how we moved away really from regenerative practices and started, really scaling up agriculture, right? And making it this very industrial process that totally destroys soil. So he's, this incredible activist and farmer. And I love this quote. It is from his book, The Unsettling of America. No matter how urban our life, our bodies live by farming. We come from the earth and return to it. And so we live in agriculture as we live in flesh. While we live, our bodies are moving particles of the earth, joined inextricably both to the soil and to the bodies of other living creatures. It is hardly surprising then that there should be some profound resemblances between our treatment of our bodies and our treatment of the earth. And that quote has just always resonated with me. I quote it very often when I give talks and do my webinars, because I think it's so essential that we understand how every single molecule in our body essentially is ultimately kind of comes from the earth and the soil. If you've heard of the word humus, not hummus, people often mispronounce it, the humus in the soil, that, the word human comes from humus. And so we are, creatures from the soil.
Oh, I love that. I gotta write that down.
Yeah,
That's
it's
great. So this whole idea, I want to talk about this whole idea of the industrialization of our food process, especially since World War II and the introduction of so many chemicals and things like that. Um, I have found, because I've had digestive issues my whole life, didn't know what it was, didn't know until I was like 37 or so that it was celiac, and even then, all somebody said to me was, my doctor was like, "So just avoid gluten, you'll be fine," and that worked for a little while, and then my symptoms started coming back, and I've tried. So I've tried Ayurveda. I've actually healed a lot with Ayurveda because I've done a lot of the lifestyle stuff. But when I lived in California, I did a raw food diet. I dabbled in veganism. I did all these things looking for like the thing, and nothing, everything was a little bit helpful, but nothing really kind of dialed in for me. And what I found was that like veganism, especially like this whole plant-based movement, seemed to be in response to the industrialization of our food. And so I used to drive from the Bay Area down to LA, and there's this strip of the highway on Highway 5. It's like I almost had to close my eyes while I was driving because it's just these lots of cows in like no grass all up next to each other. And I could feel like, I was like, oh my God. And I was like, well, no wonder people want to be vegan to not be participating in that. But
yeah.
then it became kind of like a political identity rather than doing something for your health. So what do you think about all these things like paleo and vegan, and like, is it helpful? Is it not helpful for people to, like, if they don't know what to do, to just pick something? Like, what do you think about all that?
Oh, that's such a good question. Yeah. And I think even during my healing journey, I can completely relate to the things you're discussing as far as, dabbling in this diet and that diet. And the doctor tells you, yeah, try gluten free. And you get some benefit from that. And then you start going to Dr. Google, right? And looking around online and researching everything. And, oh, okay, this diet worked for that person. I also dabbled in veganism and vegetarian for a short period. And ultimately, my goal is to help everybody figure out exactly what works for them. Everybody's so different. I think there's something to the blood typing thing, right? Certain blood types do better with maybe more plant-based. Some people need more meat. So ultimately, I want people to detach from the label. So that's what I try to help my clients do. There's this sort of tribalism that's happening, or it's been happening for a while, right, within the healthcare world, and especially when it comes to nutrition. That you got the carnivore people that just only eat animal products, and you got the other end of the spectrum, vegans that don't eat any animal products, and then there's in between, and yeah, there's the paleo diet. And initially in the beginning, I with some clients, I do like to give maybe something as a template to follow.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes paleo is helpful, where it's eliminating certain foods that might be problematic for the gut, for example, if I'm working on digestive healing. So sometimes I'll use certain therapeutic diets as a way to help guide people, but ultimately I'm trying to teach people how to fish, right? I want them to be able to learn how to eat intuitively and what works for your body. And if I tell people that, as I'm sure I'm telling your listeners right now, they're gonna say, well, how do I figure that out? What does that even mean to know, how do I know what's good for my body? And that's where some of the functional testing is really helpful. Like you mentioned, the lab work and really looking at your physiology, and really looking underneath the hood, like let's look and see what is going on underneath the surface in your body. What deficiencies do you have? How is your current diet serving you? Is it setting you up for nutritional deficiencies, and is it harming your gut microbiome? And when I say cleaning up the diet too, are you really trying to source organic as much as possible? And organic's a little controversial now because it's not perfect. It doesn't mean it's 100% pesticide free, but there's enough research now to show that organic, it makes a huge difference. It does with organic food, it is certainly a lower toxin load that we're getting. So, is your diet as organic as possible? Are you getting to know your farmer and know how they've grown their food? Do they observe their land? Do they care about their soil? So that's the whole talk, I give clients around food quality and help them with sourcing,
Mm-hmm.
sourcing the best quality vegetables and meats and things of that sort. But yeah, I try to steer people away from the tribalism, around diets, and trying to just, I guess, uh, to avoid the restriction. And especially coming from, my past of eating disorders, I don't want anyone to feel like they're in a box or to feel restricted, and to feel like they can include as many foods as possible into their diet. And it involves a lot of gut healing, and we could talk a little bit about that and what that entails. But, gut healing for sometimes several months before you can even tolerate certain foods again. But my goal is to get people to have as diverse of a diet as possible. Because if you have a lot of diversity in your diet, you have a lot of diversity in your gut microbiome, and you have a diversity of nutrients, right? So the least amount of restriction possible, and detaching from diet labels is important.
Yeah, I totally want to talk about that. That's really important because one of the things that you're helping me with is, this whole idea of the industrialized farming and
Yeah.
monocrops. Like when I drove across the country, it's like corn. As
Yes.
far as the eye can see, I'm like, I'm still in
Midwest.
Nebraska and all I see is corn. Like, and then I go into
Yeah.
the next state and it's like, it's still more corn. And that idea of only growing one thing is part of what can deplete the soil. Well, similarly, if you're, and this was an awakening for me, I love the probiotic that I was taking, but you said to me, we need to rotate your probiotic because we don't want to have a monocrop in your microbiome. And I was like, what? I never even thought
Yeah.
about that. That we actually thrive, the body thrives on diversity. And sometimes when we get into these labels of like, I'm a this or I'm a that, our food becomes very narrow. And then we're not getting that diversity. And that's part of what happened to me. It was like I was eating the same thing over and over again. My body's
Yep.
like, I don't want this anymore, that kind of a
Yeah.
thing.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
so
see.
talk about that. Talk about that
Yes.
gut process. I think it's so important for highly sensitive people.
Absolutely. And I do see this a lot too. I mean, I hear a lot of my clients say, I'm a creature of habit. I like to eat the same thing. And I think most of us are kind of creatures of habit. We do, gravitate to things we're comfortable and familiar with. It's really natural. It's, to think about including a lot of different foods in the diet is sometimes overwhelming. But our Paleolithic ancestors, I mean, they were out foraging on tons of different, species of plants, and hunting for different animals. And so they were always getting some diversity in the gut. So yeah, I mean, when I think about all of this and diversifying the gut microbiome, I love what you said, yeah, about quoting me on the monocropping. That was a big realization for me too with probiotics, because I used to think, oh, you find this one probiotic that works and you kind of stick with it. But you do want to diversify your probiotics, you do want to diversify your food. And eco-nutrition, when I think about what that means for me to have that as the name for my practice, we are an ecological system. You have a little rainforest inside of you, or at least you should. We want to be as diverse, as biologically diverse as a rainforest. So I often talk about nourishing your inner ecosystem, when it comes to, just kind of like gut healing and the layers to gut healing, I mean, what I said before is step number one is cleaning up the diet, right? Reducing toxins, because often toxins that are coming into the diet, from foods that aren't grown organically and come from these industrial situations, those toxins alone are killing off, a lot of our beneficial microbes. That allows for pathogens to take over. It creates leaky gut, which is that, intestinal wall just kind of breaking down.
Mhm.
Once that starts to break down, that sets off inflammation and lots of food sensitivities, because we have these food particles that are leaking into the bloodstream. And so, healing leaky gut, getting the microbiome back into a better balance, diversifying as much as possible. Fermented foods are wonderful, right? And sometimes some of us have to go low and slow with fermented foods because you're introducing different species into the gut that your gut may not be familiar with. But yeah, that's the first big step. Is it starts with food. And of course, there's supplementation that I use too to really help heal the gut. And I try to view a lot of those things as just tools in the toolbox, often temporary things just to get us through those several months in the beginning to really promote that healing process. And then later kind of opening up the diet and diversifying it more. But yeah, I mean, what you're seeing around you, especially when you go through the Midwest, like you mentioned, when I drive through the Midwest, I mean, I spend a lot of time in rural communities with farmers and just very, very active in the agricultural communities. It's depressing. It's very sad. And our rural communities are really just struggling. And they're surrounded by chemicals, they are surrounded by these monocrop situations where their soil is just decimated. And then that's where we're running into all these ecological problems, right? Where we have tons of water runoff. If we don't have water infiltration into the soil, soil becomes kind of hard and forms this crust on the surface. You have water runoff, right? So you hear about all these terrible flooding issues. We have droughts. So if we're encouraging more regenerative practices, then that's going to help heal the land too. So Eco-Nutrition is thinking about how obviously we're healing ourselves, but how our food choices are helping to support farmers that are really like ecological doctors. They're out healing the land. So that's what I think of is when the farmers as the healers too, that they're out healing the land, and we have to really get on board as consumers and supporting them in that process.
Absolutely. And I really recommend, if you haven't seen the movie Kiss the Ground, that's the one, right? Kiss the
Yes.
Ground. I highly recommend, because with climate change and everything, it can be so discouraging and so scary to be like, oh my God, there's no way to change this. And what can one person do? Well, if you watch
Yeah.
that movie, it goes into this whole process of what is regenerative farming. And you see that there is a solution. And
Yeah.
it really motivated, I mean, I was already eating organic, but it really
Mhm.
motivated me to look at who around me is a regenerative farmer. And I'm in
Yeah.
Pennsylvania. Luckily, there are some here. And I want to support those farmers because those farmers are actually helping to heal the planet.
Yeah.
And that's really important to me. And so you helped me with that. You helped me to see that. And one of the things I'm just going to say is, like, you guys, I totally want you to work with Sara, but besides me promoting her, I have to say that having somebody walk you through this process is really important, because it can be really overwhelming. Just like where do I even begin? But she gives you a lot of resources. And I was so happy to see that when she says, here, if you want to start introducing, some meat into your diet or whatever, here's a good resource. I'm like, oh, this resource. She's like, yeah, I've been to the farm. Like, she goes to these places and she's like, I want to make sure that the animal's doing it. Like, it's just really, really high level. I've never had such a high level of care and support that you really offer, because
Oh,
this is an
thank
overwhelming
you.
topic. It's really an overwhelming,
Yes.
and especially for me, it's a lifelong issue. And what I'm seeing is a lot of us highly sensitive people are having these, mystery illnesses because we're so connected to the planet, and the planet is hurting, and we're not
Yes.
seeing that if the chemicals aren't good for the planet, the chemicals aren't going to be good for us. If these practices aren't good for the planet, they're not going to be good for us.
Exactly. And thank you for bringing up that film. I think it's such a beautiful film, and it does give people hope. It's one of the homework assignments that I give to a lot of my clients. You need to watch this movie, watch it with your family, tell other people about it, because yeah, we're just hearing all the the terrible messaging around climate change. And it is a dire situation that we all need to work to change. And regenerative agriculture can really shift that. And it's unfortunate that there's this really false narrative, this mainstream narrative at this point, that we all need to shift to a plant-based diet to really solve our climate issues and our environmental problems. And it's unfortunately not the answer, because when you really look at how a lot of, like, for example, these plant-based meats are grown, they're part of that industrial process that we're
It's
talking about.
scary. I saw
It's very
that in a
scary.
different movie. I was like, oh, all
Yeah.
those chemicals. I was like, oh my God.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they're deriving their ingredients from the same sort of processes that aren't really helping the environment. So, obviously we don't want to eat animals that come from a CAFO, which is a concentrated animal feeding operation, right? These are animals in confinement that don't get access to pasture. It's a terrible situation. So, but we need to sort of free the animals. We need to get them back onto the land. And that's what the film really dives into, as far as, if animals are part of ecological systems, right? They always have been. So we can't just remove animals from the equation. We need to help manage their grazing in a way that they actually encourage soil health. Their manure, their urine is all fertilizer for the ground, but even the chewing action, tugging on the plants, that encourages the plant's root system to develop deep into the soil. And what that's all doing is helping to sequester carbon into the soil. And that was huge for me when I learned that, when I started looking into what regenerative agriculture is all about and how that helps the soil. When we have a lot of biological life in the soil, then we can sequester carbon, huge amounts of carbon. So this is one thing that can have a pretty dramatic impact on climate change, but
Because it
it's
draws the
something.
carbon out of the atmosphere and
Yep.
back into the earth.
Exactly. And that film does a great job, explaining that whole process. And so, this whole, villainization of animals and needing to get rid of animal agriculture is the wrong message. And it's not to say everybody needs to eat meat. There's actually some wonderful vegans that are involved in the regenerative agriculture movement. I'm blanking on his name, David Bronner. If people are often familiar with a lot of his soaps and body care
Oh yeah,
products and things
Dr.
like that.
Brenner. Uh-huh.
He's vegan, but he's a full supporter of regenerative agriculture and animal grazing processes. And so, you don't have to necessarily eat meat to support this, but if you're, obviously for those of us that are meat eaters, please, do all that you can to support farmers, source your meat from farmers that are grazing their animals properly. And you're right. I go out to these farms. I can look at the land and kind of assess, what their land looks like. Do they have a lot of diversity on their pastures? Are they rotating their animals on the land in a way that helps encourage the growth of those different plants, and they're not overgrazing or
Mm-hmm.
undergrazing? There's kind of an art and science to the whole thing, which is a very complex topic, but
Yeah.
it's the management of the animals. So I think I told you this phrase before, a common saying in the regenerative agriculture community: it's not the cow, it's the how. So it's how we are managing those animals that makes all the difference. And
What they're
whether they're,
eating and how
yep,
they're treated and all of
yep,
that. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So similarly, one of the things that you helped me to understand, which I thought was really helpful, is just like you don't want to be in a box as a vegan or a paleo or whatever. It's like you're also not big on labels when people are dealing with health issues. Like you don't want to say like, oh, I have XYZ and it's going to always be that way. It's good to know what it is, but you're like, yeah, let's see what your body does. Let's see how your body
Yeah,
responds.
absolutely. And I had to even learn that through my healing journey. I would often say when I was speaking to my therapist, my bulimia, and they had to really condition me to say, it's not your bulimia, it's a condition and it's something that's happening, but you're identifying with that label, and obviously your thoughts create your reality, right? And if you're adopting that thing as part of yourself, it just continues to manifest in a way. And it's hard because that's what we do in our culture, right? It's what our conventional medical system does, is we're kind of taught to identify a label. You get a diagnosis, you get this label, and then that's it, and sometimes they give you some options. Usually the treatment options are medications or surgery, right? And so it makes functional nutrition and just the whole integrative functional health space very different from conventional medicine, is that we're trying to teach people to heal so that your body functions the way it's supposed to, right? It's what functional means. We're trying to get your body to function naturally the way it's supposed to,
Mhm.
and detach from this label that we've been given. So, it's helpful for me to know, okay, yeah, you were diagnosed with this autoimmune condition, and or you have this particular gut issue. But yeah, detaching from the labels is an important part of the healing process.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
really, really important. And that's what Louise Hay would say. It's like how you identify and your words and all that really, really matter. I'm
Yes.
curious if you have any story that you want to share with us. It could be, from your own life, or it could be from a client that you worked with, of somebody who maybe came in with something and, through this process, like what was it like for them, or what was it like for you to like take somebody through, a healing process?
Yeah, oh my gosh, I have a lot of lovely stories when I reflect on that. You know, there's clients that I've seen really just struggle with gut health more than anything. That's probably the number one issue, right? And I'm dealing with a lot of autoimmunity too. I'd say easily half or more of my clients have some autoimmune issues. I have one amazing patient who I've been working with her for probably close to 2 years now. And she was given the label, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, a very common autoimmune disorder of the thyroid. And she had a pretty good diet overall, but we talked about food quality. She really got into the regenerative farming stuff. And, her big thing was, I want to heal my Hashimoto's. And so we worked on gut healing, eliminating certain food sensitivities for a while, certain foods she was sensitive to, eventually adding them back in after she did a lot of gut healing. And now her thyroid antibodies are really low. It's almost like she doesn't have the condition anymore.
Wow.
And we've tapered her off a lot of her thyroid medications. So that was a really, profound healing process. But it takes time. It's a journey for every person. I have a lot of women that say, I want to get off my thyroid medications, or I want to get off this medication, whatever it may be, for whatever condition. And some are, easier than others to get off of. But, when it comes to healing certain organs, and especially the thyroid, it takes time. But again, I kind of steer people away from that focus of just wanting to get off the medication, and like, let's just be really focused on the healing process and everything that goes into that. So we dive deep into gut healing and looking at stress and activating like the vagus nerve, right, which turns on our parasympathetic system, our rest and relaxation system, so we can really promote that healing process. Really diving into sleep, are you getting enough deep sleep and REM sleep, and detoxification, drinking good quality water. All of that goes into that whole healing process. And when people really commit to those, to those steps, and work through each of those layers, I just see amazing healing experiences. Sometimes things that I would even call, miracle. Like, wow,
Miracles.
it's people really just go above and beyond what I even expected they would be able to. So I always just, try to, think of the highest good for every person, and know that they're, the healing process can go way beyond what I even expect. And
Yeah.
even myself, I never thought I'd get over my eating disorder. I never ever thought I would. I thought I'd always be addicted to sugar and carbs. And I went through phases where I completely cut out sugar and was like, I have to be just sugar abstinent and never have it ever again. I'm an addict, I have to go through like a 12-step program, for sugar addiction. And I tried that, and it worked for a while, right? Until you relapse and have sugar, and then you start binging again. I never thought I'd get over it. I always thought I'd be a binge eater. And it wasn't until I basically healed like my biochemistry and got my microbiome back into a better balance, and healed my gut and worked on my adrenals and the stress and all of that, that it slowly got better over time, right? It's kind of like this, you just see it step by step kind of progress in a positive direction, until I feel like I'm completely free of it. It's
Oh, it's
been
so
years and
good.
years, yeah, since I've had any kind of relapse. It's been many years. So I'm so thankful to just be free of it, and to be able to eat sugar now, have my little indulgences, and not feel like I'm going to binge, so it
That's
is
a miracle.
possible.
That is a
Yes.
miracle. Yeah,
Exactly.
I can't say I've ever met anybody with that sugar addiction that ever feels like they can do that. So that's a miracle.
Yeah.
Wow, what a testimony. That's amazing.
Yes. Thank
And
you.
as you're saying it, two things come to mind. One is that you know, given given what it needs, the body will heal. I've believed this my whole life. I just didn't know what my body needed. I thought I
Yeah.
did. But we see this in some of these movies about, like, even during COVID, when everybody stopped doing what they were doing and then the land started to come back or the ocean started to, like, it
Yeah.
doesn't take very long because I think we're all wired for health and we're wired for that. And so just if people feel like, oh my God, it's a lot, it's like, even making a small change, your body will respond, because I've really
Absolutely.
seen that given what it needs, it will be. And so the key, in my opinion, is to love yourself enough to do it. You got to love yourself
Yes.
enough to, you can do it from
Yeah.
fear, like, uh-oh, I'm afraid I'm going to die. Or you can do it from a place of like, you know what?
Love and hope.
I deserve to feel good. I deserve to feel good.
Yes.
Or
That's
like my
beautiful.
affirmation, like, it's safe for me to feel good. It's safe for me to take care of my body.
Yes.
It's safe for me to be healthy. Those kinds of things are the things I try to encourage people, and in the work that I'm doing with people.
I like that. Yeah. All it takes
Yay.
is little steps, to just get things moving in a positive direction, and you just build
Yeah.
on that momentum. You see little things start to shift, your energy comes back, you're sleeping better, or a little bit of weight loss starts happening,
Yeah.
and then you keep that momentum going. And there's bumps in the road sometimes in the healing process for people, but most people start feeling better within just a few days or a week or two of making changes. And it can, like you just said, it could just be small changes that make a profound difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right, Sarah. So for people that want to know about what they can do, how they can connect with you, what's the best way to connect with you?
Well, the best way is through email. So you can send me an email at sarah.econutrition. So all one word. Also, my first name is without an H. So Sarah, Sara,
SARA. Uh-huh.
and .econutrition@gmail.com. I'm working on a website. So in the future, it will be eco-nutrition.com. But for now, you can
But we're
connect
not
with me
there
through
yet. Okay,
email.
that's
Yeah.
okay. That's okay. She's so busy helping all the rest of us. It's like, who has time for a
Yes.
website? So I'm going to put all of this in the show notes for people. I'm going to put that book you talked about, Unsettling America. I'm going to put the Kiss the Ground movie. I'll even put a link to regenerative agriculture. And I'll definitely put in here, if you want to set up an appointment with Sarah, you can reach her through email, Sara, SARA, .econutrition, all one word, @gmail.com. Such a pleasure, my friend. I could be talking to you
Oh.
all day long. I love this topic. I think it's so important, and I love what you're doing. And I'm so excited to watch you helping even more people. I know that this is the tip of the iceberg for you. I can just feel it. So thank you for being a guest here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much again for having me. I love what I do. I love clinical work and changing lives. So thank you. Thank you.
So great. All right, my friend. So thank you so much for being here today. And if you did enjoy this podcast, please share it with your friends, share it with your family. You can share it on social media. And the thing that helps us out the most is if you leave a review on Apple Podcasts. That really helps me a lot. And just remember that the key to magnifying your miracles is to know that your miracle is already here. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.